Hello and welcome to Mid-Coast Morning, CHLY's weekly current affairs show. I'm Joe Pugh, and I'm delighted to be able to continue as the host of Mid-Coast Morning through September. Here's what we're following this week. It's Labor Day weekend, and that means back to school is just around the corner. With students returning amid the continuing pandemic, we're focusing the first half of the show on the province's plan for kindergarten to grade 12 students. I spoke with Teri Mooring, the president of the BC Teachers Federation, who shared her concerns that the measures put in place for this September don't go far enough. I was also able to speak with Dr. Sandra Allison, medical health officer for the Central Health Region on Vancouver Island, who shared the rationale behind the back-to-school plan. And finally, while kids are about to return to school, a lot of them may have spent part of their summer on the couch in the time-honored tradition of the video game marathon. While those kids might have a new local idol, Nanaimo's own Kory Breaden, who recently set an as-of-now unofficial world record after a 145-hour session of Call of Duty. Our Elijah Robinson spoke with Breaden about this gargantuan achievement. First, however, the back-to-school plan. For some context around how things will look, I spoke with Dale Burgos, the Executive Director of Communications with Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. With school returning next week, the province has released its back-to-school guidance for the upcoming year. Among the guidelines, I understand that the cohorts from last year are gone and that there will be a mask mandate for students grade 4 and up. Are there any other parts of the back-to-school plan you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think it's important to note that the students that are returning, they're going to be very familiar with the guidelines that are going to be in place for September 7th. And so just to reiterate what those were, so all students grade 4 to 12, they're required to wear masks while indoors. That includes at their desks and on school buses. For those kindergarten to grade 3 students, through the guidelines, they're strongly recommended or encouraged to wear masks while, again, indoors or on the bus, including at their desk, but not mandatory. And all staff and visitors to the schools must be wearing non-medical face masks while in the schools. So that's something very similar to what we saw back in June. In terms of other things that's moving forward, like you mentioned, there's no more cohorts. There is, what else is there? There's a little bit of a change in terms of gatherings, for example. And so there's going to be a slow transition to virtual small group, then to larger group. And that's, I can't speak for all districts, but that's what we're planning here in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. And so there's a few different things that have changed, and that's, of course, the gatherings and how people can now come to the school. There's visitors. There's a sign-in process. We want to make sure that when visitors do come to the school, and when I say visitors, more to do with parents and caregivers, they should work an appointment out beforehand as well. So it's not as if the front doors are just completely open for everybody to come in now. And we want to make sure that we still maintain that oversee of the health and safety guidelines in the district.
So how has the contagious Delta variant been taken into account with the new back-to-school guidelines? Is there evidence that measures from last year, like cloth masks, will remain effective?
And that's something I think, Joe, I'm not a medical health expert. And so I do leave that with the Ministry of Education and the Provincial Health Office in giving us the guidelines that they feel are best for the K-12 settings. And so we do follow what the Ministry of Education, what the Provincial Health Officer, and what the BCCC has been given all of the public school districts, all the school districts rather in the province. And so we take that guidance under consideration. We follow that, and we put that into our own communicable disease plan for the district.
That's more than fair. I'm also wondering what kind of freedom the district has, separate from other districts, to sort of take its own measures or implement its own guidelines.
School districts, as we've been told, must follow the guidelines that were set forth and shared with us by, again, BC CDC, Ministry of Education, the PHO's office. It's very important that all districts do follow those guidelines. In terms of, the power to make changes, that's not something that is considered, at least by our district. We do and are very confident with what the professionals have given us in terms of health and safety guidelines.
And I'm wondering if you're aware of any talk about potential vaccination mandates for staff in the district or BC schools in general?
Nothing has been talked about, and I haven't heard anything, but of course that, again, goes back to what the Ministry of Education and what the Provincial Health Office deems appropriate for the school setting.
And how will the district be tracking data and monitoring the situation and making decisions in the first few weeks of the back-to-school plan? Basically, whether there need to be any changes made to the guidelines, whether the guidelines are either working perfectly, whether they might even be able to be relaxed, or whether things need to change and be made stricter.
Well, again, going back to what I had mentioned earlier, I mean, we always will follow the direction of the Ministry of Education and the PHO. That's key for our school district, but my understanding is all school districts in the province must follow those guidelines. Now, there also is, and what Dr. Bonnie Henry has been sharing, is that regionally, the medical health officers, so for Island Health, for example, in our instance, if there is need to identify, or rather if there's some needs identified that must be regionally specific, then of course we would look at that again, follow the direction of the health experts on that. In terms of, I guess, keeping data or keeping on top of things, if there are exposures, there's that typical process. We had heard from Dr. Bonnie Henry that a version of the exposure notification process that happened last year will continue, and we're still, again, waiting for more information on that at this point, so I can't really share anything with you on that end. But again, if I'll say there are COVID cases, there is a process in place, and again, we'll follow what the health experts deem necessary for our district.
And is there anything else you think parents should know as they get ready to send their kids back to school next week?
I think that we pretty much covered everything. I don't have my notes in front of me here. I think the biggest one, though, Joe, is if we just, we talked about the mask. We talked about a little bit about the vaccinations. One thing I do want to point out about the vaccination is that we don't ask the vaccination status for anyone. That's something that the district has put in their guidelines, in our guidelines rather. And I'm not sure what, comparing to what other districts are doing, but again, that's what we put in ours.
Dale Burgos, Executive Director of Communications with Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, on the province's back-to-school plan. You're listening to Mid-Coast Morning on CHLY. I also talked with Teri Mooring, President of the BC Teachers Federation, who shared her organization's concerns about the plan. I wanted to start by touching on the fact that on August 20th, the BCTF released a statement calling for a variety of measures with the upcoming return to school, including mandatory masking and asymptomatic testing. I'm wondering what your response has been to the measures put in place by BC school boards since then.
Well, the measures were put in place by the BC government and the Provincial Health Office, and we don't think they go far enough. And so we were calling for a mask mandate for kindergarten to grade 12, for example, and they decided that it would be 4 to 12, and all the adults, of course, which makes no sense given that we actually haven't been in a school setting with the Delta variant being so prevalent in all our communities. And so we're going into a bit of an unknown, so we think we need to err on the side of caution and have everyone masked, including young children. We're seeing in other jurisdictions that younger children are getting ill with the virus at a higher rate. And so we think it's important that that happen. And there are other measures that just won't be in place that or haven't been announced to be in place yet anyway that we think should be. We think there should be the mandatory we think there should be comprehensive testing across the entire province in schools, including asymptomatic testing, in order for us to really get a handle on what's happening with the virus. We think it's really important given the other safety measures that were in place last year have been reduced. We also think that there should be vaccine clinics set up now to target specifically 12 to 17-year-olds. And we think that clinics should be set up in schools at the start of the school year. That's a group that is basically under-vaccinated in terms of the provincial average, and we'd like to see those numbers come up. So we think there's a variety of things that need to be put in place, including we're working with the government around district ventilation systems. That's been a really important part of our work as well. We are really pushing to make sure that work is completed by the start of the school year, and that HEPA filters are ordered or other mitigation strategies are used in order to improve ventilation systems, especially in older schools. So we think there's a number of things that need to happen, and we're continuing to push for them, continuing to work with the Ministry Steering Committee on these issues and put our positions forward. We want to make sure that schools stay open in the coming year. We don't want to see schools closed because of outbreaks. We also want to reduce as much as we can students that will need to be quarantined or isolated within our schools. That was a real issue last year where lots of students lost quite a bit of academic time, and we'd like to reduce that as much as possible. We think the measures that we're calling for are very reasonable and easily implemented.
So you touched on a number of things there. One of them I want to go back to is you mentioned there were actually less precautions being taken with this upcoming school year than there were in the year past. Could you maybe just outline for our listeners what some of those differences are?
Sure. There are no cohorts, which means that there won't be any classrooms that have a reduction in the number of students in them. Last year we saw in particular a number of secondary schools that had students attend school every day, but not for the full day every day in order to reduce class size to physically distance. So that's a measure, as an example, that won't be in place this year. It was announced at the beginning of in June last spring that it would not be a measure in place. So, we're going into a school year with the same mask policy as we had last year, which doesn't make a lot of sense given that last year we were dealing with a whole different virus, which was the original strain of COVID-19. Now it's the Delta variant. And we should, as far as we're concerned, be learning from other jurisdictions on this. While you can't translate exactly from one jurisdiction to another, there are things that we can learn. And it feels like the measures that have been decided upon for this year are more reflective of the COVID-19 virus that we were dealing with last year and not the Delta variant.
And why do you think that is why then we haven't seen the mask mandate issued for kindergarten to grade 3 students just based on the data from last year and maybe a sense of complacency even, or is there something else to it?
There has been a lot of analysis around the data from last year, and which is important, of course, but not completely relevant to the situation we're in right now. And, what it appears is that the health and the provincial health office seems okay with more children getting COVID-19 this year. We're not. We want to prevent as many children and adults from getting ill as we possibly can. And so we think wearing masks is one very easy step that can be taken, given the fact that the layers that were in place last year just aren't present this year. And so masking, ventilation systems, testing, vaccine clinics, these are really simple things that can be done to keep everyone much safer in schools this year.
And yesterday, as of when we're recording this, the province gave a COVID-19 update in a press conference. During that, Bonnie Henry said that hospitalization rates among those from birth to age 19 have been very low over the past months, despite what we're seeing in some other jurisdictions around the world. How does the information contained in yesterday's press conference, both what I just mentioned and everything else, how does that change the thinking behind a safe return to schools?
Well, I think, it's great that we're not seeing high rates of COVID-19 amongst young children right now, although I will say that the numbers have increased, even in BC. We also haven't had children altogether in a school environment. And we haven't had children altogether in a school environment with with the Delta variant accounting for between 97 and 100% of the cases in BC. And so the fact is we're going to an unknown again, as we were last school year, with triple the number of cases than we had last August. And so we want to err on the side of prevention, not reacting to situations once they've already occurred in schools. In other words, we are advocating for these measures to be put in place at the beginning of the school year, and then we can, scale them back regionally as it becomes quite apparent that, it's okay to do so. We would far rather that than start the school without enough precautions and then having to implement safety measures, even if it is a regional approach. It's much easier to start the year with more stringent safety measures than it is to implement them partway through the school year. And we saw that last year with the mask policy that we'd been calling for 6 months was finally implemented. But it's more difficult to do that after the school year has begun. And so we would like to see these things at the beginning of the school year as prevention. Again, we want to see schools remain open, and we want everyone in the system comfortable. In other words, last year schools did remain open, but there was a cost to that, and that was teacher mental and physical health. Teachers were doing their best to keep their students safe, separated from other students, washing their hands, all these things that teachers were having to do on their own because there weren't enough tools in place in order to keep everyone safe. And so we don't want a repeat of last year in terms of teacher wellness. And so we would rather have these preventative measures in place. There is no downside that we can see to them. We didn't see young children having issues wearing masks. We, think that young children can wear masks. They certainly do in other countries very regularly. And so we don't see a downside to putting these measures in place, and we do see that it's important that we are doing everything we can to keep, everyone, education workers and students, safe.
How hopeful are you that some of these changes could still be put in place before the school year gets underway?
I think there's a very good chance that some of these measures could be put in place. I think there's a very good chance we'll hear about vaccination clinics to target 12 to 17-year-olds, especially in the areas where the vaccination rates are low, and it's also reflective in that age group. We're also, pushing to have ventilation systems in proper order or at least mitigated prior to the start of the school year. There's still work being done. We're still meeting with government on ventilation systems, and we're still pushing to have that happen. So there is work that is still being done, and the health and safety guidelines are not written in stone, and we saw them changed a number of times last year. And, what we would rather see is those measures, again, in place at the beginning of the school year rather than us having to continue to advocate for them partway through the school year. We don't want to see kids getting sick and then measures coming into place. That doesn't make a lot of sense to us in the education system.
And is there anything else you think people should know about the return to schools from the perspective of the BCTF?
So, teachers are really excited and happy to be returning to school. The return to school really is a signal of normalcy. The summer is over, and, we're sort of back into a regular routine that everyone values. And teachers are working as hard as we can to ensure schools are as safe as they can be, but we're going to need some help. And so we're asking that families send their young children to school with masks and encourage them to wear masks. And we're also asking families to respect the rules at the school. So different schools may have different rules in place, like staggered start and end times, like different lunch times. And we would really appreciate families really supporting schools in those measures because they're going to be in place to keep everyone safe.
Teri Mooring, president of the BC Teachers Federation, on the province's return to school plan. You're listening to Mid-Coast Morning on CHLY. In order to find out the rationale behind the guidelines, I spoke with Dr. Sandra Allison, Medical Health Officer for the Central Health Region on Vancouver Island. I wanted to talk about COVID and back to school plans, but before we get into that, I feel like I want to situate this all within the broader COVID situation right now here on the island. So according to the COVID dashboard right now, there's over 600 active cases, 13 islanders in hospital, 10 in critical care. Last week, a Nanaimo doctor went on the record and said that none of those in the hospital on the island right now are vaccinated. I'm wondering if that's something that you can confirm, and I'm also wondering what the critical care capacity is here on Vancouver Island.
So I won't be able to tell you what the critical care capacity is. That isn't an area that I have oversight of. So what I can tell you about hospitalizations and critical hospitalizations in our ICU and high acuity units are almost primarily in individuals who are unvaccinated or under-vaccinated. So 8 out of 10 cases in our hospitals and 9 out of 10 cases in our intensive care units are in individuals who remain unvaccinated.
So given that knowledge, when it comes to seeing the active case rate almost as high, if not higher than it's ever been before, how should people who are vaccinated feel, or should they look at that differently than they would have 6 months ago? How should someone right now who's double vaccinated be feeling about the situation on the island, and what can they be doing? Well,
certainly we recognize as medical health officers the very importance and effectiveness and safety of the vaccinations that we have. We have a few brands of vaccinations available to us, and they are all equally effective against any variant that we've seen to decrease severe presentations, including hospitalization, ICU, and death from coronavirus. So individuals who've been vaccinated can have confidence that the vaccine is working hard for them. If they do contract coronavirus after being vaccinated, they will experience a mild disease and they won't experience hospitalization in our intensive care unit or otherwise, and very, very low likelihood of fatality. So when we do see people who are doubly vaccinated, people who are fully vaccinated, it's not a surprise to us. There's a few reasons why we see cases in people who are vaccinated. And first and foremost, our vaccine is about 80% effective. That means that if 100 people are vaccinated, 80 of them will be fully protected against contracting or having the virus transmitted to them. But there will be people who are vaccinated who will become infected, but they will experience mild disease.
All right. Thank you for that. And one group of people who right now can't be vaccinated are those who are under 12, who are going to be returning to school in just a few weeks. So last week, the province came out with its back-to-school guidelines for August 24th, and a lot has changed since students were last in school, both in terms of vaccination rates and the prevalence of the Delta variant. How has all that information been taken into account in the return-to-school guidelines that public health has come out with?
So certainly the province has given guidance around mask usage for grades 4 and upward in our schools for staff and students. That will give a lot of, let's say, confidence to individuals returning to school who may have not felt that the vaccination alone would give them enough confidence. And so personally, the vaccines and the vaccination uptake in our community is critically important for how much coronavirus we will see circulating in our schools. Our experience over the last year was that when we see high rates of coronavirus in our communities, we saw cases in our schools. When we investigated those cases, the transmission and the source of that infection was almost 90% of the time related to social and outside of school transmission. Very, very few of our school cases were transmitted within the school setting. And that experience that we had on the island is the same experience that was seen in larger health authorities like Vancouver Coastal and Fraser Health. So we have a lot of confidence that the measures that are in place, including really trying to emphasize the basic measures of hand hygiene and staying home when you're sick. Don't go to school when you're sick. So important that parents keep kids home when they're feeling unwell to sort out what's going on. Doesn't mean they need to be tested right away, but at least see if the symptoms resolve within 24 hours, and if they seem to persist, then consider whether testing is necessary. We are also emphasizing the idea about returning to personal space in our school, not necessarily saying that social distancing is or physical distancing is the critical measure, but respecting that people do have personal space around them. But what we know about children, and this is what we've been saying is the silver lining of this pandemic, is children do not experience severe disease. Of those hospitalizations in unvaccinated people, those were all adults. We have not been seeing hospitalization of younger unvaccinated children.
And you mentioned the mask mandate for students in grades 4 and up and all staff at the schools. There are some people out there, I spoke just recently with the president of the BC Teachers Federation, who's calling for mandatory masking for all students from K to 3. I'm wondering what your response is to them behind the decision-making process not to have masks for K to 3 students.
While there is some sense that young children can manage wearing a mask through the day, that isn't the case for all children. And I believe that teachers and administrators at school would be faced with a fairly significant challenge in trying to manage mask use in those under 11. What we see from our experience with daycares where children are not masked, and the providers in daycares are not masked either, is that we have not seen widespread transmission in those daycare settings. And we feel that the immunization of those who can be immunized in families and in school settings around are adequate to protect those children. And while a mask may be a measure that could be introduced, it's just one measure. And we feel that the other measures that are in place for that age range are adequate protection. Whenever I think about what kind of protections to introduce, I try to introduce the least restrictive means. So the measures that will be most effective at accomplishing the goal that I want, which is decreased transmission in the most effective way. Adding additional layers of protection and additional measures don't always add up to the returns on that investment that we want to see. So they can be additional complicating layers that really don't add up to that much when we're thinking about trying to decrease transmission.
I'm also wondering, are there any ways in which the situation on Vancouver Island is different from the rest of the province when it comes to either the return to schools or COVID more broadly?
Well, if you look on orders of magnitude, the number of cases that we've seen on the island pales in comparison by magnitudes of 10 and greater for our other health authorities. So certainly they've seen a lot more cases. They've seen a lot more spread. They have a lot more, like a larger population. Something that's important to note, and we did have this in our analysis of cases in earlier waves, is there is more evidence becoming available to demonstrate that we see increased transmission in populations where there's vulnerable or inequities. And so if we're thinking about where are people able to access services, are people kind of having good personal health practices, what we are able to see is that certainly in different community health service areas where individuals have experienced greater inequities than in other areas, we did see that for past waves. I'm very interested in understanding if that is a pattern that we see going forward. And that will help us understand how we plan services and try to situate more supports for families in situations where we have maybe seen more transmission, that kind of thing. So we're really keeping an eye on our numbers, our community transmission, and not only that, our community vaccination rates. At schools in communities where we've had lower vaccination rates, we're deploying our mobile and outreach and vaccination services to different sites to work with school districts to enhance vaccination rates in those areas. So lots of stuff going on in the background to prepare us for school restart. But what my message is that with the measures we have in place, with the high rates of vaccination, which are unique to the island, we do have some of the highest rates in the province, that we'll see a safe return to school so long as folks heed the basic advice of everybody getting vaccinated. That's the number one measure, and staying home when you're unwell, and then ensuring that you're deploying good hand washing. we do expect cases to continue. Coronavirus is here to stay, and we know how to live with it. In the past, before a vaccination was available, there was a lot of fear about severe outcomes. Now that we have a very safe and effective vaccine available to us, we can see that many of the healthy interactions that we put on hold during, let's say, lockdowns or different restrictions, people are returning to these healthy interactions. And with that does come the trade-off of increased cases. And so long as people are vaccinated, you'll have a mild illness, and that's extremely reassuring. And for those people who remain unvaccinated, just want to offer reassurance that the vaccine is highly effective. Primary care providers are ready to have a discussion with anybody who would like about pros and cons of the vaccination. But given where we're at right now, it makes a lot of sense to prevent severe disease for you and your loved ones by receiving a vaccine who's safe. So that's kind of my main message today.
That's a very thorough and complete answer. I wanted to return to something very interesting you mentioned in it about areas of inequity. I'm wondering if I can just follow up on, was that here on Vancouver Island, or was that comparing region to region? Are there any specific examples you can go into with that?
In our analysis of the past waves, it was a provincial analysis looking at socioeconomic factors. And certainly in different areas across the province where we saw these pronounced inequities, that was also, seen on the island in areas of Victoria and areas around Nanaimo where we saw high rates of transmission seem to be associated with some socioeconomic factors that we're trying to tease out. And as I mentioned, it's preliminary information, but I think really important when we're looking at where's the burden of illness and how do we prevent, spread in our community and impact to families.
And is that data you just touched on, how is that being applied, and is that going to be applied to areas beyond just this current COVID pandemic?
I believe that the BC Centre for Disease Control and the teams that are working on what we call the unintended consequences of this pandemic are working hard to understand how this information, that it can be confirmed, through future waves and where the illness is becoming more prominent, and then also trying to use that information to educate either providers or local government partners or provincial government partners to, emphasize different pathways to care and supports for families. So I think more to come on that.
This is such a fascinating issue, and there's so much to dive into, but our time is limited. So I just want to ask, is there anything else you want to touch on that we haven't mentioned already on COVID on Vancouver Island or the return to schools?
Certainly, the health authority has been working really hard with the superintendents across the island and the independent schools across the island to prepare school leaders and the schools for return to school in a safe manner. Medical health officers are confident that being present in school in person is healthy and safe and is very important for the socio-emotional development of children. And so really encouraging folks to have confidence in the schools and in the school's leadership, and knowing that the best thing that they can do to protect their children at school is get vaccinated themselves, and to ensure that those individuals that they socialize with and connect with outside of school are vaccinated as well. We are seeing severe illness in individuals who remain unvaccinated, but not in children, in adults. And so we are really hopeful for a safe return to school, and please everybody get vaccinated. The more people we can get vaccinated, our modeling shows that we will definitely impact the course of this pandemic and maybe get back to normal life.
Dr. Sandra Allison, Medical Health Officer for the Central Region of Island Health on the province's Back to School plan. You're listening to Mid-Coast Morning on CHLY. 145 hours is just over 6 days. For Kory Breaden, 145 hours is also a world record. That's because the Nanaimo man recently spent that long in a marathon gaming session. He's still waiting on official status from Guinness World Records, and in the meantime, he spoke with our Elijah Robinson about his historic feat, accomplished in the video game Call of Duty Warzone.
So just to begin things off here, you just finished playing video games for over 145 hours. Tell me how you feel.
Now I feel a lot better. I can tell you that when I finally actually broke the record, which was the 135, or the 138 was when we sealed the deal, and that's when we actually hit the point where we knew we had the unofficial records of the 4 records, which was our big goal. I mean, everyone was super stoked, and I was still kind of not that amped, as I could say, but that was more or less that I had been up for so long. I mean, I had been up for, I think I slept only 11 and a half hours in that full 145. So, I mean, at that point when everyone's like, oh my gosh, you made the record, like, congrats, like, everyone was so excited, and I was just kind of like, but now looking back and being like, fully rested of having an 18-hour sleep after all that, I mean, it's super crazy that we were able to, I worked together and we were able to achieve what we did, for myself and for the podcast. So it was pretty cool, a little event we did. So
Right. And would you say you've caught up on your sleep since you finished?
Now it's just more or less now I'm just working on actually changing my sleep schedule, because most of the time when I was doing the podcast itself, doing the record, I was actually more or less sleeping early morning, so like the 7 to 11 and like 11 to 3 and like kind of the afternoon side of things is how I scheduled it out. So the problem ran into it now where come the nighttime, I'm having a huge problem trying to stay awake and keep her going, but I'm working on it for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's no easy feat to stay up that long with that amount of sleep. What drove you to go an extra 7 hours after you took the official or unofficial record?
A lot of it had to do with the idea that, I mean, for me, I felt that if I was going to sit there and especially these records that like the Call of Duty record has been in place since 2011. The one for the longest time playing a video game was done in 2015. And I felt like if I'm going to break these, 5+ year old records, if I'm going to break them and do that, I don't want to just sit there and be like, okay, cool, I beat the record, I'm just going to walk away now. Like, I really wanted to, put my name out there and have it where these records are going to hold for a bit, and also to show that I just, can do quite a bit step further than just the, standard 138 and then call it a day. So
for sure. And you broke more than one record. Can you tell me about the records that you broke?
So originally, when we applied and did everything, it was for the longest time playing a battle royale. That was the original record, and that was set at 38 hours and I think 16 minutes. That was the original one, and the reason why we chose Call of Duty Warzone as the game, because I figured if we had beat that one and I was feeling good enough up to it, we were going to go for the longest time playing a Call of Duty game, which was 135 hours, the longest time playing a first-person shooter, which was also the same time at 135 hours, and then the longest all-around time for playing any game, which was set in 2015 as Just Dance 2015. We wanted to break that at 138 hours and 16 minutes. So that's all the 4 of them. And then at this point, there might even be more records just due to the fact of how what games we played. So, but we know it's for sure a guaranteed 4 records if it's all approved and done.
Great. And can you tell me what interested you in attempting to break these records?
I mean, I've always been interested in it. For me, I saw it as a way to kind of put myself in the industry, because a lot of the time nowadays, especially, you see there's like basically 3 types of people when it comes to like the Twitch streamers and stuff like that. A lot of them are the really good players, people with really big personalities, or you get like the talk show people that just kind of like have their own show. Gaming's kind of the secondary nature for that. And I wanted to kind of come in there and show that there's another form of for people to put themselves out there, because speedrunning's been a thing for so long, but really for people that just aren't really good at games, but maybe are good at just kind of playing them for a long time. I mean, that's definitely a venue for people to put themselves and have themselves in the world record. And for me, I know I'm not like going to be the next esports person on Warzone. I know I'm not the greatest at Warzone, but I knew that with the way that I have played video games all my life and stuff like that, that was kind of the record I felt that I could achieve for myself. And so that's kind of why I've strove towards those records.
Earlier, you had mentioned that you had sent off footage and you're waiting to hear back for that official status.
Yeah, we're still, because just due to COVID, Guinness has definitely changed a lot of their speculations, and a lot of the way, or even the way our evidence was taken was changed. So a lot of the time, like, we would have to have physical people watching us do this entire event and have witnesses, and usually that's where it's a little bit easier to do, because it's like, okay, cool, like originally we were planning on having it where this entire event was done inside of like a Best Buy or inside of a store, and then we'd have the people that work at the store be the witnesses, and have it where it was done through security camera footage and stuff like that, where that'd be super easy to send off and be like, okay, here you go, like, here's all the people that were there, here's all the stuff that happened. But because of COVID, we really had to change our strategy on how that works. And so we had to get approval on the fact of going, okay, I'm going to be doing this on Twitch. We're going to have people that are going to watch us through Twitch and Zoom, like have a special Zoom call, and we're going to also have people watch us through like Discord and stuff like that. That's how we're going to have our witnesses. So it made a huge difference, because now we have no way of having like that secure sign in / having it where we can guarantee those people like are actually there and stuff. And also too, not having physical interaction with people outside of that, it was a huge difference for us too. And so now when it comes time to send them things, they just recently, the day before 2 days before we started the record, due to COVID still being an issue, that we are not allowed to send them anything by post for our physical evidence. And we have a current 2 terabytes as it is currently. I'm still downloading the Twitch videos to my computer because it's taken a total of 3 days, just because it's over 400 gigs worth of data trying to download. So we've got 2 terabytes worth of stuff to send them, but the problem is we have to try to find a way to send it to them online, or because we can't physically send them to them, so we have to do it to a drive. And all of the things right now, it's like even Drive is like, or Dropbox is going, okay, well, you can't put a file that's over 50 gigs in Dropbox. So now I have to go through every video that we have that's in the 100 gigs and then split it into, however many hour portions, just so I can upload it to there, just so I can get that Dropbox, so the Dropbox, so I can send them the Dropbox. So right now we're trying to work with them to find a method that works best for verifying it under their code, seeing if they can just watch the Twitch itself, and then we provide extra content outside of that, or whatever we can do. But they're super busy with everything else. So basically it's just, we ask them a couple questions, we wait 3 or 4 days for a response, and then we just move on with whatever they respond to. So it's going to be a pretty hefty process, but hopefully within the next 3 to 4 months, we should know everything and have it all finalized.
And can you tell me about the rules and restrictions for setting this record?
So the rules and restrictions is that basically the rules themselves allowed us to, where we had to play the game, whatever it may be, whatever battle royale. We were allowed, every time that it told me that I could go to a new match, I have 10 seconds to basically launch into that new match. During the times where it's loading me into a lobby, I'm allowed at that point in times to eat. I can take a bathroom break during those times and stuff like that, if provided there's enough time. For every 60 minutes I play, I get an extra 10 minutes of rest time that I can bank. With that rest time, I can either, it's always in a bank, so whenever I want to use it, it's there. And then if I don't use the rest time, then it goes towards the end of the time at the end of the period. So restrictions in that, obviously, when it came to that, we always have to have 2 witnesses watching us. One of them has to be an expert at all times. So that's, we were allowed to have it before. It was game developers, game retailers, or, someone that's in gaming, like as a maker. So we were allowed to, through some talking and coaxing with them, we were able to change it to game reviewers and podcasters as well. So that's kind of where we went with a lot of our friends that we have in the industry, and a lot of people we know that are in the industry of gaming podcasts and gaming writers and stuff like that. We were able to get them to be the expert witnesses. And then we had other witnesses as well that were just your standard witnesses that were basically people that were just able to watch and do it. With that, they have to fill out a log and do all that. So that was something that did become a challenge for us, just because, once again, when everyone's watching it through Twitch or whatever, it's a little bit harder for them sometimes to see what's actually going on. And then also, too, we're supposed to have it so the stop clock is in the camera at all times, which became a little bit of an issue for us because of Zoom. Because Zoom, after 24 hours, decided that, oh, well, we're going to end that Zoom call. We're going to convert it into a video for you, and then we're going to then start another Zoom call. And in the beginning, it wasn't too bad because it was only taking, like 30 to 40 minutes to convert this 24-hour video. But then it got to the point where it was taking, the last one took 13 hours to convert over. And we were like, okay, well, we're trying to find a way to keep the camera inside of the clock so that people could see it. I know we had one on Twitch that kept on going, but usually it's supposed to be a secondary clock, or a clock that's, manual, that can track up to a certain amount of milliseconds. So it was a lot of stuff that we had to do. I had a secondary camera set up that we had majority of the time done on, but once again, because of Zoom and stuff like that, we had issues there. And we had a secondary web browsing clock as well that was also going the entire time. So like I said, we did the best we could with all the restrictions that were put against us. And so, like I said, that's where we're hoping that with all that together and things like that, and obviously Guinness working with us and understanding the restrictions that we had and the difficulties that came with trying to do this long record where, every record before that's been done in the last while has only been under the 36-hour mark, where it's a little bit easier to try to track everything. We're hoping that they give us a little bit of a break and we can work with them to get this approved.
It sounds like a lot of planning went into this endeavor. I'm wondering, what other preparations did you have to make in order to succeed? And did you have any concerns heading into the start of the challenge?
Oh yeah, we did a lot of prep. I did training days before I even started this, so that was doing days of just staying up. But it was not only just staying up, it was also staying up with no stimulation. I just thought about like doing things that were like attentive, but not something that was, I'm gonna sit here and be super attentive. Like I think I was like, one day I like sat there and watched like 14 hours of Dr. Phil. Just something that's the same old thing over and over and over again, but kind of like not very crazy exciting, but not also like, watching the same movie you watched 100 times or something like that. So I did quite a few days of that where I was doing 27 to 30-hour stints and then doing it off 4 hours of sleep, and doing it continuously. Also, because I was working at the same time, it did become a little bit harder to do. So I was doing it during my days off, which became a bit of a pain, but that's what we had to do. Planning wise too, we also had like meal planning and, trying to find out, because I couldn't sit there and just eat giant meals. Otherwise I'd be, having to go to the washroom a lot more, keeping hydrated, especially because I decided to start this record during the record heat wave that we had again in August. I decided to do it right at the end of it where, we weren't sitting in the 29 degrees, but we were sitting at the 23 degree mark, and I'm having constant, TVs and monitors and computer and PlayStation all going. So that was definitely something that came up as an issue. And in the sense of that all the planning went out the window when we actually started the event, because I found out that after doing about, I think we did the first 16 hours, I found out that my body was getting overstimulated from all the things, just because, like I say, the hardest part, the hardest part about doing the record actually wasn't playing the video game. It was everything else that came into it. So, you're on Twitch, you've got to interact with your fans, you're trying to read their messages, you're trying to see what they're talking to you about, and you're trying to interact with them. I've got it where I'm trying to pay attention to my secondary screen and make sure that my streams are all going properly. I'm trying to make sure that my witnesses are there to witness me. I'm trying to make sure that my clock is running properly and things like that. So all those things combined together, basically at the 16-hour mark, especially overstimulated me to the point where I actually had to just lay down for half an hour just to like cut myself out for a bit there. And so that's where, when we were looking at problems that came up during the record itself, it was more or less on the side of, okay, well, being up for 36 hours, only having half an hour of sleep, nausea sets in, heartburn sets in, eating dry nuts and beef jerky didn't seem like the thing I wanted to do at that point in time. So, diet plans change, all this stuff. So it became a huge thing of like, no matter what you can prepare for, there's always going to be those things you can't control. And, it's, thank goodness I had a big giant support team from the other people, my podcast buddies I was doing this with, as well as a lot of some of the fans that were watching us, that were part of the Dual Screens Patreon group, were able to jump in and help me out there. And then I had, the fiance there as well. She was a great help here as well, ordering me food through DoorDash and things like that. And, while I'm gaming. So, it's all those little things that, no matter how much you prepare, it's definitely a challenge to do. And especially when you're doing it for that long, you don't know what comes up. There was a lot of things where you got to take into health risks into consideration too. Staying up for that long, it does a lot of things to your body where you have no idea. Like, my thumbs were bruised by hour 100. I was getting dry skin all really badly. Like, it was just, you've been sitting for so long, so sitting in a certain position started to become uncomfortable. You're having issues with your body parts falling asleep. My feet started to swell. So like, there's so many things where I never expected any of it to happen. And, it's where you just have to kind of work on the fly. And on top of that, you just kind of have to work with it and continue going. And that's where we were able to power through and get everything done.
And what's next for you now that you've completed this attempt?
Well, basically, we've now that we've got the structure of how to do this event, we're actually planning more. So yes, we're not going to do the crazy 145-hour one, because we already have that. But now we've got the structure to do a lot more of the smaller ones. My goal is basically now to make this like kind of a quarterly, if not even more frequent than quarterly event, where we pick a game, we pick a franchise, we just look at what the record is, and I take 2 or 3 days off of work, and we just go and do a straight 30 to 45 hour streak, and just keep on going and going and going, and just keep on doing more records. And then if this becomes big enough, maybe doing it where we kind of like, speed running became its own thing with like, you get games done fast and things like that, like different cons. And we were talking about the idea of even having something cool where we get a bunch of people together and doing like a marathon records, and having just a 5-day conference of a bunch of people marathoning games, and we get Guinness to come down for it, and do things like that. Like, it'd be neat to find another revenue for people to get into gaming, and for people that want to try to put themselves in something that makes it so that they have that little bit of fame to hold on to for a short amount of time or for a long amount of time. But it just gives people another way to put themselves out there. And I think that's a great avenue to go. And I hope this inspires people to, just continue their dreams and go for what they want, because, it's so crazy that, just in 2007, Guinness made the first world record gamer book. And, it's been crazy the achievements people have been able to do inside of that book. And so now it's just pushing it so people can, do what they want to do and have more, just basically do their dream. And if they can't, be the best at Apex Legends, well, maybe they can play it the longest.
Kory Breaden on his record-breaking 145-hour gaming session. That's our show for today. Thank you for listening. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Special thanks to Elijah Robinson for his segment, and everyone at CHLY would like to wish Elijah the best of luck with his new role in Victoria. Our theme music is Good Company from Nanaimo band Venice. You can help support Midcoast Morning as a project of CHLY's news department by making a donation at chly.ca/donate. Have a story you'd like us to cover? Email us at news@chly.ca. For everyone at CHLY, thanks again for listening.